Why? What would be any possible reason for why humanity on the surface of this planet should not be told everything there is to know and show about huge architecture deep under the ice of Antarctica?
At the bottom of the world lies a continent so vast it could swallow entire nations and still feel empty. Antarctica is not just remote. It is unreachable in the way ancient frontiers once were, wrapped in darkness for half the year and locked beneath ice that has survived for millions of years. Temperatures plunge below -80 degrees Celsius, winds carve the surface into shifting white deserts, and beneath that frozen silence lies a landscape no human eye has ever directly seen. Mountains the size of Europe, hidden lakes sealed for eons, and valleys deeper than anything exposed on Earth wait under kilometers of ice. But what if there's more? Linda Moulton Howe seems to believe so, and she has, rumors suggest, finally admitted what experts saw on Antarctica. This frigid tale starts in 1980. Who Linda Moulton Howe is? By the late 1970s, Linda Moulton Howe was fully embedded in broadcast journalism, working at KMGH-TV in Denver and later associated with WCVB-TV in Boston, a station that earned a Peabody Award for excellence during her tenure. Her documentaries carried titles like Poison in the Wind and A Radioactive Water, investigations into smog pollution and uranium contamination. These subjects were measurable, dangerous, and politically sensitive. In 1982, she received the Florence Sabin Award for contributions to public health, a recognition that anchored her credibility in environmental reporting. At this stage, Howe was operating squarely within the boundaries of mainstream investigative journalism, chasing data, not mysteries. But 2 years earlier, in 1980, she had already pivoted to a new direction, one that would define the rest of her career. Her documentary, A Strange Harvest, examined cattle mutilations reported across multiple U.S. states. The film aired on May 25, 1980, and drew the largest audience for a locally produced documentary in the station's history, earning her a regional Emmy. But the content marked a departure. Instead of industrial pollution or water safety, Howe was now documenting ranchers describing animals found surgically altered, drained of blood, with no clear cause. Law enforcement officers and witnesses told her, sometimes off record, that the perpetrators might not be human. This was the moment where the narrative shifted from evidence-based investigation to the edge of the unexplained. What followed was a gradual drift. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Howe increasingly focused on UFO sightings, crop circles, and alleged extraterrestrial interactions. Her 1989 book, An Alien Harvest, expanded on the cattle mutilation theme, arguing a connection to non-human intelligence. She began appearing on programs like Sightings and later Coast to Coast AM, a radio show known for late-night discussions of paranormal phenomena. By the early 2000s, she had become a recognizable figure in what is often called ufology, a field that blends witness testimony, speculation, and limited physical evidence. At the center of this new phase was her platform, Earth Files, launched in 1998. The site evolved into a massive archive with over 2,500 reports covering everything from astrophysical anomalies to eyewitness accounts of unexplained events. It is like a repository of interviews where military personnel, scientists, and anonymous insiders share stories. Howe documents, records, and publishes. Supporters describe her as persistent, someone willing to listen when others dismiss. Critics, including skeptical researchers and science writers, argue that her work often lacks rigorous evidence. Author John Michael Greer noted that her conclusions about extraterrestrial involvement relied heavily on ambiguous interpretations rather than verifiable proof. Joe Nickell, writing in Skeptical Inquirer, went further, calling her a credulous journalist, pointing to instances where photographic anomalies were later explained as camera artifacts or dust interference. Yet Howe never positioned herself as a scientist. She has consistently framed her work as investigative reporting, collecting testimonies, not conducting laboratory experiments. Over decades, she has interviewed thousands of individuals, from ranchers in rural America to alleged intelligence insiders. Some of these sources remain anonymous. Others are named but unverified beyond basic credentials. The pattern is consistent: Multiple voices, often unconnected, describing events that challenge conventional explanations. Whether those patterns indicate hidden truths or shared misinterpretations remains unresolved. Her public appearances reinforce this dual identity. She has been featured on networks like CNN, the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, and BBC Productions, while also speaking at UFO disclosure events such as the 2013 National Press Club gathering in Washington, D.C. In those settings, she has made her position clear. She believes non-human intelligence may be interacting with Earth and that governments possess more information than they disclose. This brings us to the remote South. Antarctica, a scientific frontier. Far from the prying eyes of the common man, this otherworldly white mass is larger than Europe. Isolated, silent, and brutally indifferent to life, Antarctica spans roughly 14 million square kilometers, and 98% of it is buried under ice that averages 1.9 kilometers thick. It is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth. Temperatures have plunged to minus 89.2 degrees Celsius at Vostok Station, the lowest ever recorded on the planet. Winds can exceed 300 kilometers per hour in katabatic bursts, tearing across the ice sheet with no natural barriers to slow them. Even the air itself is hostile. Antarctica is technically a desert, receiving less precipitation annually than the Sahara. Yet this frozen expanse is not lawless. In 1959, at the height of Cold War tensions, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty System, a framework that still governs the continent today. It came into force in 1961, locking Antarctica into a unique legal status. No military activity, no territorial expansion, no nuclear testing. Today, over 50 countries are signatories. Inspectors from member states can visit any station at any time. In a world defined by borders and conflict, Antarctica stands as a rare experiment in cooperative science. At the center of that experiment sits McMurdo Station, the largest human settlement on the continent. Operated by the United States, it can house over 1,000 personnel during the summer season. Located on Ross Island, near the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf, McMurdo functions like a logistical nerve center. Cargo planes land on ice runways. Icebreakers carve supply routes through frozen seas. From here, scientists deploy into the interior, carrying instruments designed to read what lies beneath the ice, because Antarctica's greatest secrets are not on its surface, but below it. To see through kilometers of ice, researchers rely on technology that feels almost surgical. Ice-penetrating radar sends radio waves deep into the ice sheet, mapping layers, voids, and bedrock structures. Seismic surveys generate controlled vibrations, measuring how waves travel through subsurface materials. Satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above, like those in NASA's ICSat missions, track minute changes in ice elevation, detecting movements invisible to the human eye. Every anomaly is checked against geological models, every signal compared with known natural patterns. And what they've found is staggering. Beneath the ice lies the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a range comparable in scale to the Alps, completely buried and undiscovered until Soviet seismic surveys revealed it in 1958. There are vast valleys, ancient river systems, and even tectonic features that hint at a dynamic geological past. Antarctica is not a flat slab of ice. It is a continent with a hidden topography shaped over hundreds of millions of years. Then there are the lakes. More than 400 subglacial lakes have been identified, sealed beneath the ice for thousands to millions of years. The most famous, Lake Vostok, lies under nearly 4 kilometers of ice and stretches over 250 kilometers in length. First detected in the 1970s through radar imaging and later confirmed by seismic data, it remains one of the most extreme environments ever studied. Scientists believe it has been isolated for at least 15 million years. When Russian researchers drilled into it in 2012, they discovered microbial life, organisms adapted to darkness, pressure, and near-freezing temperatures. Ice cores extracted from Antarctica push the timeline even further back. At sites like Dome C and Vostok, cylindrical samples of ice have revealed atmospheric records stretching back 800,000 years. Tiny air bubbles trapped within the ice preserve snapshots of Earth's past climate, carbon dioxide levels, temperature fluctuations, even traces of volcanic eruptions. These cores have become some of the most important evidence in climate science, showing clear correlations between greenhouse gases and global temperature shifts. Of course, the question always lingers. With so much hidden beneath kilometers of ice, could something artificial or alien exist undetected? Antarctica is far from fully understood. Large regions remain underexplored, and technological limitations still constrain what can be directly observed. Drilling through kilometers of ice is slow, expensive, and logistically complex. Satellite data, while powerful, is indirect. There are gaps, places where resolution drops, where signals blur, where interpretation becomes more difficult. It is within this uncertain domain that such claims exist. But before we explore these claims, let's take a short walk through history, shall we? Operation High Jump. In the austral summer of 1946, less than a year after the Second World War ended, a massive U.S. Navy task force cut through the Southern Ocean and turned toward the most remote land on Earth, Antarctica. This was the beginning of Operation High Jump, the largest Antarctic expedition ever attempted at the time. It unfolded between August 26, 1946, and February 1947. At the center of it all stood Richard E. Byrd, a seasoned polar explorer and rear admiral, who had already flown over both the North and South Poles. Byrd was one of the most decorated explorers of his era, awarded the Medal of Honor and trusted by the U.S. Navy with one of its most ambitious post-war operations. His leadership brought credibility, but also urgency. The United States had learned hard lessons about logistics, survival, and mobility during the war, and Antarctica presented the ultimate testing ground. The numbers tell the story of scale. High Jump deployed approximately 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft, organized under Task Force 68. The flagship, USS Mount Olympus, carried command operations, while icebreakers like USS Burton Island and USS Northwind forced paths through frozen seas. Aircraft included reconnaissance planes, helicopters, and seaplanes. The mission established a base camp called Little America 4 on the Ross Ice Shelf, continuing a legacy of earlier Byrd expeditions. The official objectives were clearly defined in Navy documents. High Jump aimed to train personnel in polar conditions, test equipment in sub-zero environments, and expand U.S. operational capability in Antarctica. It also sought to consolidate American presence in the region and evaluate potential sites for future bases. Another critical goal was aerial mapping. At the time, vast portions of Antarctica remained uncharted, and High Jump's aircraft were tasked with photographing as much coastline and interior terrain as possible. By the end of the mission, they had captured images covering roughly 70% of the continent's coastline, an unprecedented achievement. But Antarctica does not cooperate easily. Conditions turned hostile quickly. Aircraft struggled with mechanical failures in extreme cold, where lubricants froze and metal became brittle. In December 1946, a Martin PBM Mariner seaplane crashed during a reconnaissance mission, killing 3 crew members. Even routine operations could turn deadly in seconds. Supplies had to be carefully rationed, and every movement across the ice required precision. This was not a place where mistakes were forgiven. Despite these challenges, the expedition generated a wealth of data. Thousands of aerial photographs were processed, contributing to more accurate maps of Antarctic coastlines and ice formations. Scientists and engineers collected meteorological data, studied ice thickness, and evaluated how machinery performed under extreme stress. The information fed directly into future polar operations, influencing how nations approached Antarctic exploration during the Cold War. High Jump was, in many ways, a bridge between heroic age exploration and modern scientific research. Then came the return. In early 1947, the task force withdrew earlier than initially planned. Officially, the mission had achieved its primary objectives, though some secondary goals remained incomplete due to weather and logistical constraints. Byrd himself spoke publicly about the strategic importance of polar regions, warning in a 1947 interview that future conflicts could involve aircraft flying over the poles. It was a forward-looking statement, yet it is in this transition from documented mission to public memory that the narrative begins to shift. Decades later, Operation High Jump would become a focal point for speculation. Some interpretations claim the early withdrawal hinted at a confrontation or discovery, often involving alleged structures, advanced technology, or even unknown forces. In fact, long before satellites and seismic surveys, Antarctica had already captured the imagination of writers who had never set foot on its ice. In 1938, H.P. Lovecraft published the novella At the Mountains of Madness, a story that described an Antarctic expedition uncovering vast, ancient structures buried beneath the ice. Cyclopean cities, non-human creators, and a history that predated humanity itself. It was fiction, but it planted a powerful image that beneath Antarctica's silence, something vast and unknowable could exist. As real-world expeditions like High Jump entered public awareness, those fictional ideas began to blend with reality. The concept of hidden bases, ancient ruins, or unknown forces beneath the ice found its way into modern storytelling. Films like The Thing turned Antarctic isolation into a stage for discovery and dread, while Alien vs. Predator went further, imagining entire pyramidal structures buried deep beneath the ice sheet. For some reason, we all like to believe that there is something out there, something strange, something alien. This brings us back to Linda Moulton Howe. What Howe's sources allegedly report. According to Howe's own reporting, the earliest threads stretch back to the late 1980s and 1990s when individuals claiming military or technical backgrounds began describing things they said they had seen in Antarctica. Several of Howe's sources, described as former Navy personnel or contractors, allege that during flights or ground operations they observed geometric shapes inconsistent with natural terrain. Straight lines, sharp angles, and symmetrical outlines. In standard geology, ice and rock can fracture in patterns that appear linear, especially under stress or erosion. But these witnesses insist that what they saw went beyond coincidence. Then there are the radar anomalies. Antarctica is routinely scanned using ice-penetrating radar, a technology capable of mapping features kilometers below the surface. Howe has cited accounts from individuals described as geophysicists or radar technicians who allegedly encountered unusual readings, large voids or shapes that appeared organized rather than random. In scientific practice, such anomalies are not unusual. Subglacial lakes, buried mountain ranges, and sediment layers can produce strong, clean signals. But in these testimonies, the interpretation shifts. The anomalies are described as potentially artificial, much like underground bases or bunkers. Then there are airspace restrictions. Antarctica does have controlled zones, particularly around research stations and sensitive logistical areas. Flights are coordinated through national Antarctic programs, and certain areas require clearance due to safety or operational reasons. Howe's sources, however, describe areas that allegedly do not appear on standard maps, zones where even military pilots were told not to enter. The explanation offered within official frameworks is straightforward: safety, communications limits, and protection of ongoing research. But the sources insist that the real goal is concealment, a way to keep specific locations out of reach. The most dramatic claims emerge from alleged drilling operations. According to some of Howe's interviews, contractors involved in deep ice drilling, sometimes described as occurring in the early 2000s, reported reaching layers that did not behave like normal ice or bedrock. They described smooth surfaces, metallic textures, and even markings resembling symbols. Some sources claim that objects were recovered, materials or devices allegedly transported to classified facilities in the United States or elsewhere. These claims often include references to the Department of Defense or unnamed research laboratories, suggesting a chain of custody that removes the evidence from public view. Howe has stated that she has collected more than a dozen such accounts over roughly 20 to 30 years, from individuals who, in her view, did not know each other and described similar themes. This kind of convergence can feel compelling. In investigative terms, it suggests a pattern. But what does science have to say about all of this? What science actually confirms? From orbit, Antarctica appears blank, but science has been decoding it for over a century, and the first revelation is time. Ice cores drilled at sites like Dome C through the European Project for Ice Coring in Antarctica reveal records stretching back about 800,000 years, while the ice sheet itself has existed in various forms for millions. When scientists map Antarctica using radar and seismic tools, they often detect shapes that look strikingly geometric. Sharp ridges, straight lines, angular formations. But geology under extreme pressure behaves in complex ways. Glacial movement, tectonic shifts, and melting cycles can carve patterns that mimic artificial symmetry. What looks engineered at first glance often resolves into natural formations when analyzed through multiple datasets. One of the clearest examples is the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a vast range buried beneath more than 2 kilometers of ice. Discovered through seismic surveys rather than direct observation, these mountains are comparable in scale to the Alps. Their existence proves a key point. Antarctica's surface hides an intricate geological landscape formed over hundreds of millions of years, long before ice sealed it away. Radar has also revealed something else: water. More than 400 subglacial lakes have been identified, including Lake Vostok, which lies under nearly 4 kilometers of ice and stretches over 250 kilometers. When researchers accessed it in 2012, they found microbial life, organisms adapted to darkness, pressure, and isolation. Many so-called anomalies in Antarctica come from how radar interacts with layered ice. Ice sheets contain compressed snow, volcanic ash, air pockets, and liquid water. These layers reflect signals unevenly, sometimes creating bright, geometric echoes. In scientific studies, these are routinely identified as lakes, rock boundaries, or voids caused by melting and refreezing. What appears mysterious in raw data is usually explained through known physical processes. Despite decades of research, no peer-reviewed evidence supports the existence of ancient civilizations in Antarctica. Archaeology requires physical artifacts and verifiable context. None have been found beneath the ice. Similarly, there is no confirmed evidence of recovered non-human or unknown technology. Antarctic research programs document and share findings internationally, and while some logistical or military details remain classified, scientific discoveries are not hidden. This is where Moulton Howe's claims run into their biggest limitation. Her work relies heavily on testimonies. Let's assume that the people she interviewed did indeed tell the truth. But even then, it would be a subjective truth. A truth based on what they thought they saw, not what something actually is. The claims almost always lack physical evidence that can be independently tested. Without verifiable coordinates, raw data sets, samples, or repeatable observations, the claims cannot move beyond narrative. Many of the features described by her sources, such as geometric shapes, underground voids, or unusual materials, already have well-documented natural explanations. Even restricted zones and classified operations, often cited as signs of concealment, are standard in military logistics and safety protocols in extreme environments like Antarctica. So while her accounts are consistent in theme, they lack the one element that would elevate them from possibility to proof: independently verifiable, physical evidence that survives scrutiny beyond the story itself. That said, Antarctica is not fully mapped. Large regions remain only partially understood due to the sheer thickness of the ice and technical limitations. New discoveries continue to emerge. The unknown is real. In the end, science draws a clear line. Extraordinary claims require physical proof. Testimonies alone are not enough. Antarctica remains mysterious, but every verified discovery so far points to a natural world shaped by ice, rock, water, and time, not hidden civilizations or advanced technology. Still, we have a tendency to think otherwise. That's why we love movies like The Thing. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.